When I think about setbacks, I use the term character building moment, and it's one of my favorite terms
I like that.
because it's kind of one of those things that allows you to lighten life's adversity. And no two people's adversity is better than or more significant than the other, because like everybody is going to encounter things relative to what they've experienced in their life so far that are difficult.
Hey, hello, and welcome to the Feel Strong Fitness Podcast. My name is Justin McClintock, and this week we have Chris Liddle on the show. Chris breaks down the art of connection and transformation for coaches and clients. We dive into what makes a coaching relationship truly successful, how to spot the perfect coach, and unlocking your mindset for peak performance. We also touch on some red flags to avoid, tips for overcoming setbacks, and how to foster genuine human connection, which makes all the difference. This conversation was great, is packed with insights for anyone looking to grow, honestly, in fitness, business, or life. Chris Liddle is on the Feel Strong Fitness Podcast. Chris Liddle, welcome to the Feel Strong Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Justin. I am excited about this. I feel like the time went by really fast because I was, okay, I got this in the calendar, and then boom, it was here.
Yeah, it roared by, frankly.
Yeah.
I want to start right off the book because I feel like you have a little bit of a unique perspective because you've done a lot of coaching, but you've also got to talk to lots of other coaches and fitness, health, wellness people. I thought we might start by kind of creating a guide for clients, potential clients, folks who think they need to do fitness, who are looking for a coach. I think between the two of us, we might be able to be of some use to people. So there's someone out there listening to this who's like, I think I need a coach, but where do you even start? Maybe that's my first question to you is, are you looking for a coach? What do you look for?
Yeah, I love that. And I've had this question posed to me a few times. And the way that I like to kind of look at it through is like observe. So I tend to consider myself a bit introverted. I've learned to not like identify too strongly with introversion because it can really limit your opportunities in life. But with that said, I am someone who, when I'm in a room full of people, it feels natural for me to see kind of like how people interact with each other, to just notice like the subtleties and stuff. Like, are they smiling? Are they laughing? How are people greeting each other? And so then with that said, if I was looking for a coach and I'm imparting advice that I would take myself, I would be kind of paying attention to the level of connection that that coach has with other people, or just kind of like how they position things. So if they're going to compliment somebody, or if they are going to teach somebody something while providing feedback, like how are they positioning that feedback? Are they saying like, no, you're doing it wrong? Or are they showing them another way to do it? Like, are their methods going to keep that person in the gym, or are their methods going to cause that person to have to find somebody new? And so these are kind of the observations that I'd make. So if you are someone who is looking for a coach, let's say if it was in the in-person space, take any opportunity that you can to observe. So if you've got like 5 people offering you a free consultation, go for it. Lots of people are open to having a consultation with somebody and it not turning into a sale. Like when I have a consultation with somebody, I'm not roping them into something that they have to work with me. They have the absolute choice to keep looking. And then in the online space, not only do you have that opportunity for consultations, but I also think that it's a good idea to do a deep dive on the podcast that these people are on, or look at their content more closely. But truthfully, like, most people will have been on a few podcasts at this point, and so you'll have lots of opportunities to kind of understand like what is their style, how do they handle having to reframe situations, having to answer tough questions, how do they express when they don't know something. Little subtleties like that, I think, can go a long way when you're kind of looking for somebody to work with.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think very similar to my own way of thinking of like, you're looking for someone you can connect with really well. There's lots of different types of coaches out there, and a lot of them are really good, right? That person you described earlier, who's an incredibly harsh kind of drill instructor type, yelling at someone, that person is going to connect great with a certain type of individual. There are people out there that's exactly what they want, like hold my feet to the fire and yell at me. And I didn't come here for small talk. It's not my vibe, but it is somebody's vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So that person would probably not do very well with me. And we would figure that out probably in the first 5 minutes. And I would say, hey, I don't think this is a great fit, but I'm going to find someone for you to work with and go find a drill instructor type. The online part, I think, is extremely well laid out because you have this opportunity to kind of go through someone's showroom, right? Whether it's on their Instagram or their podcast or whatever, you can just check it out and see if it like vibes with you. And then, scroll back 3 months and see if they were doing the same thing and see if this is a person who's like pretty consistent, ideally evolving, learning, all of those things. But if 3 months ago they were, exclusively training Spartan races, and 3 months before that they were exclusively doing bodybuilding competitions, and 3 months before that they were just yelling about the keto diet, and they're kind of jumping, you don't know who that person's going to be in 3 months now. And maybe they're learning and evolving and becoming something spectacular and just not there yet, or whatever the journey is. But especially if you're looking for something potentially a little bit long-term, taking your time at the beginning to gather all of that information, I think is time very well spent. Like go on a few consults, jump on Zoom calls with people, show up in a gym and have people do whatever their assessment or first session is with you and see how it feels. And you will find someone, it might be the first one, it might be the fifth one. You're like, you know what? I feel comfortable. I feel listened to. I feel like this person understands what I'm doing and isn't just putting me through the paces. This is it. Because online or in person, it is an investment.
Absolutely. It's very similar to if people are looking for like a mental health therapist, it can be quite a journey to find the right person who you resonate with. But you're putting that extra effort in because you have this buy-in towards what it can do for you. So you want it to be something that you know that you can like stand the test of time with. Like a lot of people, their buy-in with something like therapy is that they know that if they stick with it for a long enough period of time, that it could change their life. And then the same is true for online coaching, in-person training, is you want to find somebody who you can build a rapport with, where you can trust them, so that no matter like if there's holidays or crazy things happening in life, like no matter what's happening in life, that connection is strong enough to stand the test of time, so you don't have to start from ground zero over and over again.
Yeah, that's a great point. Looking at the other side of it, are there any red flags? If you're looking for a coach and you see this thing, you should strongly consider walking away, looking at someone different.
So it's nuanced because there's so many different perspectives that people can have, and so many different personalities. Like it's very similar to what you've kind of outlined, where like there are going to be some people who are wired for like a different style of coach than you or I. There are some people who it's just like, we would not be effective at coaching their personality or just their needs or just where they're at in their journey. That said, if I was to pick out like sort of like little qualities or traits that kind of stand out to me as like not making this person effective as acting as a coach, it tends to be sort of that like narcissistic behavior where it's just like you can tell that they will get to their goals at your cost rather than you getting to your goals. So there's lots of instances where we can kind of like take a step back and observe sort of the actions of a business or an individual, and they might make a rebrand without considering how it impacts other people, or they might realign certain services without considering how it helps people. Like I'll give one example that is tangible. So let's say there's like a brick and mortar business and they offer boutique one-on-one coaching. So they've had like a whole bunch of people sign on because they feel most comfortable with like a one-on-one service and they're paying accordingly. And then maybe that business, they have personal goals where they want to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. And they restructure. And then without consulting any of their one-on-one people, they turn it into group coaching, or perhaps they just completely flip the business on its head and turn it into Zoom calls only. So it's one-on-one, but it's Zoom calls. And if they didn't consult with their people that had paid for a commitment, that maybe it was like 12 months of coaching, that is what I would consider to be a red flag, where it's not like open dialogue with the people who paid for the service, and where by nature you are not fulfilling the obligations that you have to that person simply because you changed your mind as a business owner. So I like to see like continuity, I like to see transparency, and I like to see integrity in people's actions. And it's just, it can show up in so many different ways. And there's more than one way to do it right, but then there's also many ways to do it wrong too.
Yeah, that's great. I think something that came up while you were talking about that, because I have some experience with that brick and mortar flip you were speaking of, I will often ask coaches kind of what their average client retention is with the lead, like, I'm only signing up for a month. How often do people normally stay with you? And if the answer is anything shorter than 3 months, you definitely at least have some follow-up questions.
Yeah.
If you're going through people and people aren't staying longer than 90 days, especially if there's like a 60 or 90 day commitment up front, I would be concerned. Yeah, like if you're not hanging on to people, I want to hear like, if honestly, man, when people start with me, they stay for a year and a half at least. Okay, well, I'm only going to be here for a month is what I'm telling myself right now. But it's good to know that people stay, which tells me you are to some degree satisfying a bunch of different people in a bunch of different ways and meeting them where they are, and not just like something you alluded to, kind of smashing them into your own box, right? You're not just doing whatever you need to do for the before and after picture. And then, okay, that client's gone after 6 days, we'll do it with somebody else. But continually meeting them where they are as they evolve and as they progress.
I really like that point, because there's times when I'll be in like a new client consultation, they might actually ask a similar question. And for the most part, like a lot of like I would say founding clients, they've never signed any kind of like a commitment to like a minimum amount of sessions or anything. The expectation that I generally set with them was like, okay, I'm going to put you in the calendar, and then when you feel that you're ready to move on, just like let me know, maybe like a week in advance or something. And if you're sick, just like let me know like at least 24 hours in advance. But I'm not like, oh, you have to be with me until a certain date. And so with that said, like I've had some people who have trained with me for like 7 years now. And they haven't signed any forms. They're not stuck with me. They're just like, no, they just keep doing it. And like, they're reaching goals and everything. But it's just like our lives evolve, their lives evolve, and they just kind of like to keep that collaboration going. So there's some questions that could put some people in the hot seat. But like, I think for both of us, probably, we kind of get excited about it because it's an opportunity to kind of like show where we might be shining. Because yeah, if you build a really good connection with somebody, it becomes a lifelong connection. Whether or not they stay on as an active client, they're probably somebody in our world where they always feel comfortable asking us questions about a workout or something, like just something respectful of our time and everything. But just we are their go-to person probably for life.
Yeah, 100%. And I've absolutely had, you probably have too, I've absolutely had clients who worked with me for a year or two, and then they left, and then they came back, and they left. And it's never acrimonious, and it's never because they aren't being served. It's, hey, I think I can do this on my own. Yeah, you can. I told you 6 months ago you do this on your own. Great, high five, get out of here, tell your friends. And a year later, they're like, all right, I'm training for something really specific and I need a hand. Great, come on back in.
Yeah.
And in that meantime, like, we've had about the same level of communication.
Yeah.
And they reach out and ask about this, or a form check on this, or, hey, my husband wants a piece of equipment. Is this garbage, or is this worth the investment? Like, there's not a wall put up because they aren't paying me for the programming or the coaching. It's just they aren't getting that part. And when they want back in, they're more than welcome back in. And I have a bunch of people who have seats basically permanently saved at the table. If they all show up at once, I don't know what I'm going to do, but the seats are in fact saved.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
And something you just said, which actually kind of leads me to my next point, is I love it if I'm in a consult and a client starts asking me like interesting or tough questions. How long do people stay with you? And what's the shortest anyone's ever stayed? Or what's the worst reason somebody left? It's like, oh, you really care. You're in. You're not just bouncing on the surface of this thing. You are digging in and you are interested. And I'll answer it to you honestly and to the best of my ability. And I'm getting excited because like, if this is a click, it's going to be really good because you're already so engaged up front that I'm almost guaranteed you're going to be engaged in the training and the hard part, right? Like the day-to-day and the slog and the boring middle part. that is neither the before nor the after, but it's where the magic actually happens. And there's a strong probability you're going to be really engaged and focused on that too, if this is the kind of energy you're bringing into something as simple as a consult.
Absolutely.
The sort of the other side of this discussion, which I don't think gets talked about enough, is what makes a great client. So if someone is coming to you, you don't necessarily need more clients. You're happy to work with people who work with you and are a good fit. What kind of things do people do, or what aspects or values? I don't want to narrow it too much, but what makes like a really effective client?
I'm trying to narrow it down because whenever a question like that comes up, I'm obviously going to think of like some go-to people, individuals I've worked with that question reminds me of. And in some cases, it's just simply the execution. Like a client that's really fun to work with will execute everything that's prescribed to them. And regardless of whether or not it was perfect or not, it's just the fact that they're willing to actually do the thing or try the thing or attempt the thing or show up for the thing. But the other thing is that without being able to communicate with someone, it's hard to impact change. So a person needs to be open to communicating. They might not be someone who's a very social person. Something that I have become quite good at is I can take someone who doesn't talk much and I can make them sociable because it's almost like they have to. And I personally believe that helping someone with their ability to connect with other humans also improves their quality of life. But for me, what it does is it helps me to dig a bit deeper to just understand what styles of communication work well with them, like what gels with them, what doesn't. Some people like to have quite a bit of small talk, and some people, small talk kind of makes them miserable. So you almost have to have like constructive conversations in between. So like where some people, they can come in and they can be like, oh, well, funny story, I saw a bird on the way here. And then other people, it's like you're going to be more served to talk about things pertaining to their outside of the gym goals, whether it be like home ownership or the new car that they're trying to get, or even just like something happening in the world and how it relates to their like personal professional goals. But if people don't communicate in any capacity or respond to things or answer texts or answer emails, then your hands are tied. There's not much that you can do. And so it's kind of like the onus is on us to get collaborative and just understand different people's communication styles, whether they are going to communicate with you on a Zoom call or over text, what they respond to, what they don't respond to. Like, you don't want to agitate anybody that doesn't need to be agitated, but at the same time, you don't want to there are some personalities where if you are too quiet, they'll feel like they did something wrong. And so you have to pick up on that quickly. And then when you do pick up on it, you get more out of them as an individual, because then they're in their session or they're in their call and they're understanding that they didn't do anything wrong and that all they have to do is just be 1% better, as many people say. So that's kind of like where I go with that, is just like really getting them good at communication. And if they are good at executing things, or they always do what they say that they're going to do, that is amazing. That's not my expectation for people. I'm not like, you have to do this, because I understand that like part of the reason that they're working with me is because that's an area of their life that they want to improve. And so if I can at least get through some communication style that really works with them, there's a chance that I can help them enhance some of the other aspects of their life that could change how they show up as a client, not only for me, but perhaps for anybody else that they work with down the line outside of fitness as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely dead on. And I think it's one of the things that makes someone coachable is the ability to get feedback from them. I always tell people I want to hear everything, and I especially want to hear the bad stuff. I like the good stuff. It makes me happy. I put it in a little photo album, and when I'm feeling down, I go and look at the good texts people have sent me. But this is awkward. This hurts. I can't do this. I'm embarrassed to do this movement in a public gym. I'm sure I'm doing this wrong. I've tried 3 times and it's not working. That stuff is actually more helpful. that stuff like lets me really hone in and make their program, their session, whatever it is, better and better and better in a way that the good stuff isn't as helpful. It's very well received, but it's like, you're nailing it. Oh, good. I mean, I tried to nail it, so excellent. But communicating and setting expectations that I need the communication, especially when something doesn't feel right, is really important. Now, on that, I completely agree. It is on us as coaches to be open to a variety of communication styles and kind of finding our way in to a bunch of different types of people, kind of different vibes, different communication styles, different ways in. You said you were good at helping people to communicate, at making them better communicators. And that's a whole other skill set. What are some ways you go about that?
I think the best way to be a good communicator is also to be a very good listener. And I will share how I've honed that skill, because I don't think I haven't always had this skill set that I currently possess, but I've had like variations of it. And so we talked about just my opportunities to talk to coaches and other people, athletes, stuff like that, mostly through the podcast, but also I do a lot of walking and talking and networking and stuff. But that has given me an opportunity to meet people that I know nothing about, make no assumptions, and learn from them, just like give them opportunities to share more insights with me, and kind of like holding like space. So like sometimes we'll ask a question and somebody starts answering it. We don't necessarily let them finish answering it. So we only get half of the insight that they're giving us. And so by honing in on your listening skills, sometimes you just create a pause so that if they weren't done sharing what they were going to share, they have more opportunity to continue on sharing. A lot of times, especially like if somebody's just starting out in this industry, they'll try and fill in the space more aggressively, where it's like, okay, it's silent, I gotta talk more. Their other person still had more to say, but now they're less likely to share it. So yeah, I would say it's a combination of not only being like intuitive to what they have said, but also holding space for them to say more, and just giving them opportunities to share, and not having this like agitated rush to like push them through the gates and be like, now you have to share things during this 10 seconds, and then I share things, and then you share things, and I share things, because that's not how these things organically work.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a lesson I had to learn the hard way a couple of times, including, I don't know if this happened to you, when I first started the podcast and I would listen back to a conversation with a guest, and I was so ready to just like jump onto my next question or hit the next thing or make sure I got to the next bullet point. And I would listen back, and sometimes I was cutting people off, which was awful to hear yourself like stepping on somebody and not realizing it. But the worst experience I had was listening to someone say something, and the natural question popped in my head as a listener, and I didn't ask it. And I heard myself just go on to the next thing. I was like, dude, you weren't even listening. You weren't even listening. You were like looking at a list of questions or something and not paying attention. And I think all of these things come down to being genuinely curious. If you're really curious, you're just going to let someone give it to you. And you don't have to be the problem solver. You don't have to show off your expertise. And when someone says, well, I was running, my back started hurting, you don't have to jump in with the 3 things it probably is and how we would find it. Shut up. Let them tell you. Because they might tell you, and I don't even like running, and then my core started hurting, and then I tripped and fell, and I realized it's because I wasn't sleeping. I've been sleeping because I'm anxious, and I'm anxious because of this life thing. Because of this life thing, I don't even know if I can work out anymore. Do you know a way I could work out in like 10 minutes? That was the question. And you started talking about ankle dorsiflexion. The ability to be quiet and sometimes leave those uncomfortable pauses, especially in like an initial consult. I will just let space hang.
Absolutely. Like I totally agree. And I will share that like I definitely learned a lot of that skill through the podcast. There's been times when people have just like messaged me and been like, I really like that episode, but they were saying things and I noticed there's opportunities for you to ask questions that you didn't ask. And like in that time, like some people, it's hard to get feedback. And I find that the more feedback you get, the easier it gets. You just kind of become numb to getting feedback and you start to think like, how can I use this feedback to better myself? And so like if someone was to be like, I listened to your podcast and just chopped it apart, that would be more of a gift than it would be some kind of like sabotage of me. Because if somebody's listening to something so closely that they're able to make constructive observations like that, then it shows that they're invested in me to begin with. And so they wouldn't be doing it maliciously. It would be more so that they could get more out of the conversation too. So that when they listen to future episodes, it just gets better and better. It's a long journey. Everybody's always learning and refining their skills. Like there's people who are probably senior citizens who are still learning how to listen better or learning how to create space. So it's not so much as like us versus them kind of thing. Like, look at us, we're so good at listening. It's more so like, just like everybody always has an opportunity to kind of see what they can refine within like their physical progress, like getting stronger in some things, maintaining strength in some things, getting more mobility, maintaining more mobility. We can also work on those skills within our communication, which not only enhance our ability to work with a coach, but also enhance our ability to maintain relationships, be that professional, romantic, etc., which is great for quality of life in all facets. But it's kind of like we can refine a skill and make it better, but we could probably also regress with that skill too. And so it requires consistent practice of that. And I mean, this is something that I kind of go off on tangents a lot, but I think that it is very important for people to create time and space in their life to have real life, genuine human connection, where it is just kind of like a no expectations, two people hanging out, sharing what's going on in their life, sharing their big ideas, sharing maybe some of their vulnerabilities, whether it be like things that they're worried that won't work out and they voice that to somebody else and they have a sounding board. Or maybe it's like there's a lot of people who are going to go through seasons of their life where something that they thought was never going to happen is happening right now and they just need to talk to somebody about it. Whether that be like an aging family member or a cancer diagnosis or like an overnight layoff. Like they thought that everything was going perfectly and then the next day it just turns out that they got a character building moment. And so by promoting that people consistently make time to actually connect with people with really no expectation other than the fact that you will go to your favorite coffee spot and then start your visit there, I think it will enrich people's quality of life, and it also creates more opportunities to improve your life, even if it's with an existing connection. It doesn't even have to be with somebody new. I think it helps things if it's with somebody new because it helps you practice, because you definitely have to learn to listen when it's somebody that you don't know, because you don't know anything. And so the more you listen, the more you know, and the less you listen, the less you get out of that visit.
That's very well said. A couple of things there. We know now that the having social connection is incredibly important to human beings. Like it's essentially a basic need now. And we see this a lot with senior citizens and or people with chronic conditions, chronic pain, who the world starts getting smaller because it's harder to leave, it's harder to do activities. As they lose social connection, their longevity decreases. It literally will help you live longer and better if you seek out social connection. And a really important point that you made, which I have the best personal and frankly business opportunities that have come to me have come through that, which is spending time going to a thing, meeting someone, talking to someone without expectation. You don't come in as a transaction. You don't come in with a want or an ask or a need. All of those things exist. We all have wants and needs and things we would like. And it's natural, if you meet a person that you know or you look up to or is in your industry or whatever, or is in your town and it's just popular and interesting, there might be things that you want. But if you come in open and curious and just see what happens and be an active participant in that, great things happen all the time. but you have to be sincere about it. You can't be pretending to be curious and waiting for your moment to slip in your ask for 5 referrals in the next week because I can help 10 guys lose 15 pounds in 20 days or whatever your thing is. Like, that's not going to work. And everyone's going to smell you when you walk in the room, and you're going to start getting really frustrated because you're not actually approaching it sincerely. You're not doing what you say you're doing, and everybody knows it.
It's funny that you say that, because like hopefully this helps filter out future DMs, because there are times when people reach out to me and they're like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, oh man, it's so good to hear from this person. I'm like, good, how are you? And like, yeah, I'm gonna do a podcast tour, I'm looking to book myself on podcasts. I'm like, okay. I'm like, maybe just see if I'm alive first or something like that, just like connect a bit more, because I got nothing for you. So it's just, when people are like on a heat-seeking mission to get something out of it, it lessens my desire to work with that person in any way. And it's not because I don't like that person, it's just because it goes in the absolute opposite direction of what I need for my betterment. Like, just like I like to create connections because I know how much it helps others, well, it helps me too. And so like if they're going into something with like some very like strict expectation as to what comes from it, it kind of takes away the enrichment from it, because we're kind of like, okay, we're going to connect with this person, we are both going to record podcasts, and then we're going to step away, they're going to be launching their brand, I'm going to publish it at this day, and once that is done, there's no more. Whereas on the other end, I could actually promote the thing that they wanted to promote, but maybe they're like, hey, I just wanted to connect and kind of see how things have been going for you, and maybe I'll share some things that I've been up to. I just really liked our visit last time. Do you have time at this time on your calendar? I'm like, oh yeah, no, that sounds really good. And then like maybe you just have like a meeting of the minds, and you get to talk about life, you get to talk about career, and then after that it's like, oh yeah, you're telling me about that thing that you're up to. I'm actually really intrigued. I wouldn't mind having you on my podcast, and we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Like, that's 2 different ways of doing the exact same thing. So it's not saying that I'm opposed to promoting people or working with people and all that stuff. It's just like, if it is not genuine, I'm going to go so far away that you're going to have a harder time reaching me next time. It's like people lose. Here's how I would phrase it. I'd be like, you're losing your Chris Liddle privileges because like, I don't have to answer every message. I don't have to be just nice to everybody. I can actually just like close the valve and leave people on scene and just do what so many other people do to others. So it's just like a person's intent, a person's like actions, they compound. And so the more genuinely genuine you are in everything that you do, the more that you'll get out of life, not only professionally, but also personally too, even if you think it's slower.
Yeah, 100%. And context matters so much. I'm not doing this, but if I was working with an agency that booked me on podcasts and booked other people on my podcast, and an agent reached out and was like, hey, I've got 3 pitches for you. Ready? Perfect. Yes, this is exactly that context. But I think everybody has at least one person in their life where the phone rings, you look down, you're like, oh God, what does he need? He only calls me when he wants something.
Yeah.
0 times has this dude called to check on me. He's moving again, isn't he? I know he's moving. He's going to ask me to move him again, and I'm going to do it because I've known him for 30 years.
Yeah.
And it hurts more. And I don't check on that guy either, because I know he only wants things. He's not actually interested. There's not a connection here. But there's other people, the people I've had on the podcast the most are friends. And we just have conversations all the time. And we'll start on something. I was like, whoa, time up. Too good. We got to do this for 45 minutes. Can we record it? Like, I'll do it now, but can we record it? Like, yeah, let's go. And we got on and just have the conversation. And it wasn't a promotional thing. And those are the people who I'm the most likely to share their stuff and the most likely to recommend other people to them, because it's genuine and sincere. And I know their values and their intent are in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Slightly pivoting, but sticking on trying to help potential and future clients as much as we can. You're someone who's overcome a number of setbacks, it's fair to say. I assume you run into clients who have setbacks all the time. Either potential clients who are having problem A, B, and C. Maybe they've gone to other coaches who haven't been as successful as they would have liked to solving them. How do you identify that a setback or a wall or an obstacle even exists? And then how should people approach it? Let's say they're not working with you currently. They're on their own, but they want to start working on something today. How do you identify a setback? And what are kind of your first steps to approach it?
That is a tough question, but I got an answer for you. So, first and foremost, when I think about setbacks, I use the term character building moment, and it's one of my favorite terms because it's kind of one of those things that allows you to lighten life's adversity. And no two people's adversity is better than or more significant than the other, because like everybody is going to encounter things relative to what they've experienced in their life so far that are difficult. And so I'm a little bit like, when somebody talks to me about setbacks, most of my stuff was logistical. And in that sense, it's overcomable. There's other people who have overcome cancer diagnosis, like they've battled cancer for like half their life or something, or they've had to go through chemo 4 times or something like that. And that definitely feels like a very heavy character building moment. When it comes to me kind of like identifying someone who has had a setback, it's just a matter of like, if they have a moment where they doubt themselves and then they start to feel like maybe they shouldn't doubt themselves anymore, but they haven't quite made that full arc yet, that could be like a setback. And like, I'll give an example here. I've worked with lots of people, and it's kind of like when you put out a certain energy, you kind of like attract that certain energy. So my entry into the fitness industry was largely sparked by getting dumped, but by like a wonderful girlfriend. So it's like, I have nothing bad to say. It was just kind of like something that I learned about myself. And it wasn't even necessary that I did anything wrong. It was just like that they talk about timing, and it's like, it just wasn't meant to work out. But because of that sort of like energy where it's like I can bounce back from something like that, I've had lots of people come to me in the midst of heartbreak or in the midst of that kind of like a setback. And where I'm identifying it is when I can see within that person that they don't see in themselves what someone like me sees in them. And this is merely like professional on a very high level, where it's like, you know how you can observe somebody doing something and you just can tell that they could do it just a little bit better, but they keep telling you that their limit is that 80% that they've just demonstrated. And then no matter how much evidence piles up that they could do it 20% better, they deny it. That I would consider to be perhaps like where they're coming across a setback. And then no matter who's working with them, whether it be me or somebody else, their ability to get them to see that extra 20% within themselves and then execute it would be how you help them overcome that setback. And like another tangible example of where I see this, and this is kind of like my bias. I'm very biased towards having a fulfilling job. It's something that I take it super seriously, because if you have a job that you hate, it can destroy your health and it can destroy your happiness. Like, I have worked with people who are no longer around, who I used to like do stuff in the warehouse with and work collaboratively with them, and the job was so unfulfilling, or like something in their life was so unfulfilling that it was just painful for them. And it breaks my heart, because it's just like, it makes such a big difference to do work that is rewarding. And so basically what I was trying to get at here is that sometimes you're seeing somebody have a setback because they're continuing to do something that doesn't make them happy, but they're doing it nonetheless because in their mind, that is their peak. That is all they can do. And they're willing to be stubborn in that and just keep pushing. And it can lead to that being the reason that they don't pursue more challenges in life, whether it be like running a 10K or trying a new sport or something, and it's because, well, they've already been through so much during their 9 to 5 that they have nothing more to give towards bettering themselves beyond their career path. And so how, like for me, how I would help that person overcome a setback is helping them to learn more about themselves and helping them to get more in tune like with what is their purpose kind of thing. So like for a person to learn about themselves, they get a better view on like what their potential truly is. And for most people, they have to achieve some sense of flow state. So flow state for some people can be you are on a spin bike. I have a spin background, so that's an example that I go to a lot, where you are putting in the max effort that you think that you can put in, but then you sustain it for a minute longer than you're comfortable with. And you reach this flow state where you have to kind of like shut off the emergency lights in your brain and you just keep going. But then you realize you haven't died. You're okay. Like you have this blissful state of awareness that like you can do difficult things. And like in the grand scheme, it wasn't a risk to your health. Another example of flow state could be you are rolling in jiu-jitsu with like one of your favorite training partners. You each know kind of like past injury history, certain styles, certain strengths, certain weaknesses. And this person is just about to submit you, but if you just hold on for just a bit longer, you could probably get out of that submission. That would, in my mind, be another opportunity for flow state where rather than like panicking and like breathing heavier and like freaking out and spazzing out, you understand this person enough and you understand yourself enough that if you can just like hold on for a few seconds and just make some slight repositions, like frame just a little bit better, move something just a little bit differently, you could probably get out of that. And on the other side, that person who maybe has you in a submission, they might be able to finish it. Whereas they might have given up before, like, oh, my arm's getting tired, I can't hold this much longer. They're in their flow state because if they just sustain it for like 2 seconds longer, that could be 2 seconds that completely wins you that match or that sparring thing. So it's always kind of about closing the gap between how someone who knows themselves enough to see strengths in others perceives another individual and how that individual sees themselves. Getting somebody from selling themselves short to owning what they bring to the table. And it lights me up when anybody is able to create that transformation for somebody, because if it was just up to me and you, we wouldn't be able to reach enough people to make like a significant difference. So we have to enroll as many people as possible to create that life change for people.
That's an awesome interpretation of approaching setbacks, because it actually, we didn't even speak about this before we started, but two things that I've been like thinking about obsessively for a couple of months now. And that is the importance of changing beliefs before we can change anything else. Often beliefs about oneself, but including like what's possible. You know, if you strongly believe that whatever your goal is, if you strongly believe that you can be someone who has more energy in the morning, if you strongly believe that you can back squat 400 pounds, if you strongly believe that you can walk up the stairs without pain, you can be a person who does that, it is vastly more likely to happen. It literally will change the game. And if you don't believe it, if you believe it's not possible you're ever going to walk up stairs without pain again, you're also probably correct. The same person, the exact same injury history, health scan, assessment, etc. One person strongly believes it's possible, the other person strongly believes it isn't possible. They're both probably correct.
Mm-hmm.
Getting people from that I don't believe spectrum to the other side, that's heavy lifting. Designing weightlifting programs is nothing. I can do that in my sleep. But bringing people along that belief spectrum, and it is, so I have a theater acting background way, way, way long ago, but I did a ton of work there. And I literally think about it as a character building exercise. I spend lots of time like, all right, this person, what does this person do? How do they take their coffee? How do they walk? What kind of clothes do they wear? When they walk down the street, what do they notice? Who do they see? How do they approach? When they talk to a service worker, like what's their tone? How are they, like all of those things affect how, farmer number 3 waves at the king as he rolls by. And that's just what makes up a person. And it's the same thing with individuals. And the other thing you talked about related to that is helping people kind of find their actual limit. I've spent a lot of time, I currently think about it as like neurological arousal, which is the worst term and not a way you can speak to other human beings. But for some reason, my brain keeps going there. And it's that idea of, well, this person is working really hard and they're working and say, okay, you're going to do single arm presses to failure. And they go 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 and they stop. And if you saw it, you'd be like, oh, they've got at least 3 more. They definitely have 3 more. And they say, I couldn't possibly, that was it. Absolute my limit. And they're right because they believe that's true. And I am nearly getting obsessed with finding ways to unlock this door for people that comes naturally to some and not to others, right? You mentioned jujitsu. I have a jujitsu client who's amazing. She's a world champ, double gold at Worlds. And one of the things that sets her apart from everybody else is it's almost easy for her to find whatever the next gear is. There's always another gear. Like she's beat down, she's tired, she's been beat up, there's not enough recovery time, she's underfueled, she's visibly physically injured. All right, next gear. And she'll just keep turning it up. And eventually the other person can't keep up. And yes, she's very strong and she's very capable and she's very technical, but she believes in herself so fiercely that it overcomes other people. And that's a really hard thing to teach. When you find people who have it, it's great. And you can mold it, you can shape it, you can aim it, you can guide it. But I'm becoming a little obsessed with developing it in people. What do you think about that?
I like it. I dig it. I think it's an exciting realm of interacting with people in their coaching. And I would say that I probably have similar sentiments in that it kind of lights me up. I'm like, okay, what can we do to like move the needle a bit further? And what I tend to do is I present volume to them in different ways.
Tell me about it.
I will consistently prescribe the same exercises so that they can progress through that exercise, but I'll creatively give them volume in different ways so that they don't even know necessarily if they're progressing or not. I'll explain like the concepts to them. Like I'll make sure that they understand how it all works, but I'm not going to always calculate the math for them as we're standing there. Sometimes I'll just make little switches. Like my favorite example is trap bar deadlift. In the gym that I contract out of, we have kilogram plates and pound plates. We have metal plates and we have
I know where you're going. I love it.
And so it's like you can take someone who showed you what they perceive to be like a 9 out of 10 RPE kind of thing, and then you can give them the real 9 out of 10 on the other side of the gym, and they won't know the difference, but you'll know that they actually demonstrated something that was truly difficult for them. And I'll also kind of gauge this on a person by person basis, because sometimes it can be like you can just see their ability to tolerate intensity. So what I mean here is that you can see where somebody's like quit is. Sometimes there is only so much gas in the tank. And so maybe the next time you demonstrate an exercise, you demonstrate it with just bands or an isometric hold or slow tempo. And you see like how much they're willing to push with something that is extremely low risk, but it feels like the most intense thing ever. Like something that I do with some people, and it's got a variety of reasons to apply that to it, but sometimes I'll have somebody hold their squat in the bottom with like a very, very, very moderate weight. Like if it's somebody who's like used to squatting 200 pounds, I'll get them to hold like a 30-pound dumbbell. My favorite example of this is I've got this, he's massive. He's a big dude and he's one of my friends. His name is Andre. And he is like 6'6", 250 or 260 pounds or something like that. Big dude. He could move a house. And I had him do like a lot of isometric stuff. I had him do like a split squat hold where like his knee is just hovering off the turf or whatever, and he's holding it for 30 to 60 seconds on each side. And despite the fact that he could do some intense like reverse lunges with like 100 pounds per side, this like crippled him. And it was just body weight, or even just like goblet squat hold at the bottom. You're holding it for 30 seconds at the bottom, and then you're just going into 10 regular tempo reps afterward. And just the fact that you had to sustain that position for so long, and it just kind of fatigued your core muscles, made you tired, gassed you out. But then you had to do something that would normally be simple, but you had to push through it, even though it felt tough. That's where I like to kind of like uncover like a person's breaking point without breaking them. And I can start to see like whether it be like the volume tricks where they got them to lift like 20 to 40 pounds more than they said that they could. And then I explain to them what they just did. And then they're like, oh, sometimes I sell myself short. Like that's the story that they're probably thinking when I show them and I do the math and I'm adding up all the plates. I'm like, look, you literally just surpassed what you said was your max, and you did it effortlessly. Like, look at your face on the camera here. So a combination of those two things is how I get all sneaky and play Jedi mind tricks to try and show people things. Or it's just like, maybe I'll put them in a different frame of mind, a different environment, and then I'll bring them back to that exercise. So for example, like sometimes if somebody just has done exercises where they're used to not getting the outcome that they want, and then you get them to their next exercise that's like one of their strongest exercises, but because they're just so used to not getting the outcome that they want, they're positioned to not give it everything that they've got for that exercise that they're most competent in. Sometimes if you give them just like some easy wins beforehand, and then you give them that exercise, you're probably going to get a better outcome. And it might be something where like one day you did the A version and it made sense because you were able to get through the most training volume. But then the next day you did a B version, and like most of the training that they did prior to like that lower body exercise was just like bicep curls and lateral raises because it's like low hanging fruit, fun to do. You get a good pump and it doesn't really impact anything else. So they got that win. But then you had them like do their squats, and they PR'd their squats this time, not just because of a change in like how their training was laid out, but also just psychologically in that they had their win, they're on a roll, they're on a hot streak, and they want to keep that going. So they're going to pull a little bit extra oomph out of the gas tank to get that next win, because it's so much more fun to have a winning streak than it is to create your comeback story. Although I love creating comeback stories, it requires an immense amount of grit and resilience to be able to actually like execute it. We're all good at talking about it, but very few of us are good at actually executing it, where like people ask us how we did it one day.
Yeah. And that, yes, first of all, yes. And so much of what you're talking about is talking about noticing and playing with kind of people's state, where they are, where's their mindset, how are they breathing, what's their outlook, how are we doing? Like, yes, everyone has a max. And to be clear, listeners, we're not saying like, if you have your absolute max, there is a point that no amount of willpower or trying harder or, screaming is going to make that number go up. But there's a big difference between people who spend all day thinking about these squats that are coming at night and how bad they feel and how under recovered they feel and how their back was sore last time and how it's going to beat them up. And they walk in and their heart's already going 165 before they've even taken the barbell out of the rack. They're probably not going to have a great day. But a person who gets a win and a win and a win, and suddenly like, you know what? You're moving great. We're doing squats today. Like, you're moving too well. We have to. It would be irresponsible to not do squats. Do you have any experience with CrossFit?
Yeah, I did CrossFit myself for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And I've had some people who just have loved CrossFit. So we've kind of like snuck a little bit of CrossFit into their workouts.
I think you'll understand this then. I used to coach lots of CrossFit. I've coached easily 10,000 CrossFit classes. And Fran is like the top of the pyramid in CrossFit workouts. It used to be the benchmark and there's a bunch of reasons why it is, but it's 21:59 thrusters and pull-ups. And people, like, when they hear Fran is coming or Fran's coming this week, they will adjust their whole training schedule. They'll change everything about it to make sure that this like 3 to 9 minute workout goes really well. one of the most fun experiments I ever did, and I stole this from somebody, I don't remember who, so I apologize to whomever I'm forgetting that I stole it from, but it was a Saturday class, and we announced a push press front squat pull-up workout. And we warmed everyone up and got them ready. We're doing this thing. I was like, all right, 3, 2, you know what? No, we're doing Fran. 21, 15, 9 thrusters and pull-ups. 3, 2, 1, go. And started the clock. And people didn't spin it. Like, it came out of nowhere. Everyone knew what it was. Everyone in that class knew what a thruster was, knew what a pull-up was. It was a very experienced group of people. But all of a sudden, they hadn't had time to get all worried about it and make sure that they had the special grips on and this shoe was the jumping shoe and this, like, they just went. A bunch of people PR'd their Fran because they were just in a different place. And I got yelled at a lot too, which is also fine. But that kind of like playing with people's state and playing with how people approach it. And as a athlete, client, member, exerciser, recognizing your own state on these things can radically transform your ability to keep doing more things and be more effective and progress the way you want it to. Right? I have a saying with my clients, it's pans hot, gotta cook. And like, maybe I wrote you 3x8 at 80% on whatever exercise. But if you're going and 80% is just flying, this might be a, sorry, coach, gotta go for it today. Pans hot, gotta cook.
Yeah.
And the other side too, like maybe it's a max out day. And if you walk in dragging and you're not feeling good and you just had a fight with someone you love and work is really hard, like, no, I'm not going to put 400 pounds in your back today. This isn't the day. We'll find another day. It'll be okay. We're doing something else. But recognizing and playing with that state can absolutely unlock physical progress in a way that I think is maybe underappreciated.
Totally agree. And especially with like that adapting, like when people just, they have life things happen. And my favorite way to adapt to that is just kind of making sure that they understand that there's kind of like an additional purpose to the pivot, or justifying it for them, like helping them understand, like when you're going through things that are very emotionally heavy, just like a lot of things like that takes energy too. It takes energy in the same way that like adding an extra lower body exercise to your workout would impact how the other lower body exercises happen. I mean, like us thinking and using our brains takes energy. And when we're going through times of uncertainty or times of sadness, we're most likely using our brain quite a bit. And regardless of whether it's a significant amount or an insignificant amount of our brain, like energy wise, like when we're like doing the equations, it doesn't really matter. It's all relative. And so helping people see that, oh yeah, no, it's normal to make adjustments when crazy things happen in life. So now we're going to go ahead and do that because everybody else in the gym has to do it too. Because if they don't, they're not able to sustain their fitness journey in the same ways. Like if you try to crush yourself and you are going through something difficult, you're probably going to take like 1 or 2 weeks off after that, just simply because of what it does to you when you try to burn the candle at both ends.
Couldn't agree more. Chris, I feel like we could talk about this stuff for another hour, but I want to make sure that I'm at least slightly respectful of your time. For people out there who want to find you, tell them, where should they go? What should they do? How do they reach out?
The easiest way to find me is if you go to Instagram at Christian Liddle, but I also have a couple websites. I have invigoratetraining.com. If you want to check out my podcast, just type in podcast.invigoratetraining.com. I'm starting to create kind of like some more easily accessible ways to check that stuff out. And then I have christianliddle.com, and that is going to be kind of like a hub for like things specific to marketing consulting and just things like that. But I also want to mention listeners, viewers, everybody who's part of this community, make sure that you're leaving a review for this podcast. It makes such a big difference. And I think a lot of people will tune into a lot of episodes to a show and they'll be like, oh, there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people tuning into this. But a lot of the time, out of that group, even if it's like 20,000 people in the audience, very few feel called to kind of like show their appreciation. But if everybody that was tuning into episodes of this show went and left a review, the amount that would impact the show's reach is like transformational. Like I consult with podcasts all over the industry. And if everybody that heard this sound bit went and left a review, 5 stars. You can leave 5 stars on not only Apple Podcast, but also on Spotify. And like share the podcast in like your social media too, because it kind of gives that like, it gives the credibility. Because if people see that you're listening to it, they're more called to listen to it. If you just say, go listen to this show, or you just leave a review and you leave, nobody understands that there is like this kind of like this wave, this movement to listen to the conversation. So I just really strongly encourage everybody to make that a priority before they kind of carry on with their day, because it just makes such a big difference. And I think Justin is doing great things with his show here.
Well, I really appreciate that. I did not ask you to do that, but I appreciate it tremendously. It's almost worrisome how much reviews matter as far as like, does it even show up when you type fitness in podcasts? And the more reviews and the more of that. And when people share my stuff, that is one of the biggest credibility builders for me. Like, I know you're listening to it. And when people reach out and DM me like, hey, this meant a lot to me, or I dig it, or I have a question about this, I love all of that. When people share it with their friends, their following, all of that, that must have been really good. I should go back and listen to whatever I said there. Because like, if they think it's good enough to share to somebody else, the same thing as you sending someone to me to train. Like, whoa, I knew you trusted me, but you're trusting me with your mom?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Now I feel even better about this. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And it comes from the most genuine place. There's no check coming in the mail for me. This is just like, I've listened to the Feel Strong Fitness podcast before. It is a good podcast. So everybody get out there and give it some credibility.
You've got your marcher runners, people. Get to it. Chris, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, Justin, for having me on your show.
Absolutely.